व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवते उत्तमाश्लोके भक्तिर्भक्ति नैष्टिकी. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, verses 21 to 31. Prabhuji, are you sharing the screen?
Yes, Mataji.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. The Supreme Personality, text 21, the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes very dear to those devotees who have no material possession, but are fully happy in the possessing the devotional service of the Lord. Indeed, the Lord relishes the devotional activities of such devotees. Those who are puffed up with material education, wealth, aristocracy, and fruitive activities are very proud of possessing material things, and they often deride the devotees. Even if such people offer the Lord worship, the Lord never accepts them. Text 22. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead is self-sufficient, he becomes dependent on his devotees. He does not care of the goddess of fortune, nor for the kings and demigods, who are after the favor of goddess of fortune. Where is the person who is actually grateful and will not worship the personality of Godhead? Text 23. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear King Vidura, Sri Narada Muni, the son of Lord Brahma, thus described all these relationships with the Supreme Personality of Godhead to the Prachitas. Afterward, he returned to the Brahmaloka. Text 24. Hearing from Narada's mouth the glories of Lord, which vanquish all the ill fortune of the world, the Prachitas also become attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Meditating on his lotus feet, they advance to the ultimate destination. Text 25. My dear Vidura, I have told you everything you wanted to know about the conversation between Narada and the Prachetas, the conversation describing the glories of Lord. I have related this as far as possible. Text 26. Sukdeva Goswami continued, O best of kings, King Parikshit, I have now finished telling about the descendants of the son of Swambhu Manu, Uttanapada. I shall now try to relate the activities of descendants of Priyavrata, the second son of Swambhu Manu. Please hear them attentively. Text 27. Although Maharaja Priyavrata received instruction from the great sage Narada, he is still engaged in ruling the earth. After fully enjoying material possessions, he divided his property among his sons. He then attained a position by which he could return home back to Godhead. Text 28. My dear king, in this way, after hearing the transcendental message of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees from the great sage Maitreya, Vidura was overwhelmed with ecstasy. With tears in his eyes, he immediately fell down at the lotus feet of his Guru, his spiritual master. He then fixed the Supreme Personality of Godhead within the core of his heart. Text 29. Sri Vidura said, O great mystic, O greatest of all devotees, by your causeless mercy I have been shown the path of liberation from this world of darkness. By following this path, a person liberated from the material world can return home back to Godhead. Text 30. Sukdeva Goswami continued, Vidura thus offered obeisance unto the great sage Maitreya and taking his permission started from the city of Hastinapura to see his own kinsman although he had no material desires. Text 31. O king, those who hear these topics about king who are completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead obtain without difficulty a long life, wealth, good reputation, good fortune, and ultimately the opportunity to return home back to Godhead. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport of 4th Canto, 31st chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Narada Instruct the Prachitas. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mataji. Shivani Mataji. Krishna. So we'll start with the brief prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Desatarini Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today we are ending the whole of the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam with the ending of this chapter, chapter number 31 in the fourth canto. It's a nice section. There are many lessons for us, and also we'll see the overall essence of this section also, last section also. So the overall context was Maitreya Muni is speaking to Vidura. So in this conversation, he was describing how when Prachetas happened to meet Lord Narada Muni in this case, in this chapter, and then they asked him to instruct him on transcendental knowledge. So when they asked him, Narada Muni started to describe. So Burjan Prabhu in his study guide describes this whole chapter in simple three summary. So I'll read from there. Essentially, three sections Narada Muni's instructions are covering. First is he's explaining how bhakti is the goal of all spiritual practices. That is the highest goal, bhakti, performing bhakti. Number one. That is from texts 8 to 14 he describes. Now, number two, everything emanates from Supreme Lord. That means Supreme Lord is the source of everything. So that is why Supreme Lord is worshipable. First is about how bhakti is the best. First is the ultimate goal of all spiritual practice. After describing bhakti, then describing how Supreme Lord is the source of everything, so he should be worshipped. Now, that is the 15 to 18. Now, 19 to 22, Narada Muni describes how everyone should satisfy the all-powerful Supreme Lord. How? By performing bhakti. He described bhakti first, and then he described the Supreme Lord, how is the origin of everything, so you should worship. Now he's saying everybody should satisfy Supreme Lord. By what? By bhakti. So bhakti, Supreme Lord, everyone should satisfy Supreme Lord by bhakti, like that. That's the essence of this chapter in one sense. So now going through this section now, we're in a text number. This is the essence where he's saying by bhakti we need to satisfy Supreme Lord. That is the section we are in. Let's go to text number 21 where we are starting today. Text number 21 describes how Supreme Lord becomes very dear to devotees. So many of you probably remember, but with the chapter 12 also, Krishna describes how a devotee becomes dear to him by different qualities that we possess like that. So now here also he describes certain two essential qualities. What are they? He describes a devotee have no material possessions, number one, and they are fully happy in possessing bhakti for the Lord like that. Those are two qualities described. What does it mean that devotee doesn't have any material possessions? It means that we don't have attachment for material possessions. That means we don't feel proud that I have this, I have that materially like that. That's not the main source of pride for a devotee. So that is number one. Now, but what is he happy with? He's happy with little devotion that is coming to him. That is what a pure devotee characteristic is. That is thinking, is so happy that I have bhakti like that. That's the idea. Not in a way that to boast about oneself, but he is considering that is the most valuable. Bhakti is the most valuable compared to all the other material possessions one may have. That is the point being shared here. Prabhupada elaborates that in the purport. And he describes that means no material possessions means don't have pure devotees don't have material possessions means they don't have material attachment for family, society, friendship, children like that. So we still need to take care of our family, including children, with a spiritual conception that they're given to me by Krishna, so I serve them like that in that mode, not with attachment. Okay, that's one point. Then Prabhupada also describes that such a pure devotee, we should be careful not to offend such a pure devotee. And he gives the example of Ambrish Maharaj and Durvas Muni. Durvas Muni, one time, we will hear that past him in the ninth canto also. one time he offended Ambarish Maharaj. So, how that happened very briefly, Ambarish Maharaj was doing a fasting for Ekadasi and it was time for him to break the Ekadasi fast. But at that time, Durvas Muni came. So he asked him, Durvas Muni, please take your bath and then come so we can both honor Prasadam like that. But Durvas Muni took long time along with his devout disciples. So in the meantime, Ambarish Maharaj consulted Brahmanas and said, what do we deal with it? One principle is we should never eat before guest. And that principle is we should break the fast of Ekasi in a particular time frame, whereas Parayana time. So how should I deal with? Then the Brahmanas guided him. Okay, why don't you take some water? Because you fasted from everything, no drinking water also yesterday. So why don't you take some water? That taking water is in one sense breaking the fast, and also in other sense, water is not considered like you ate something. So it is, covers both the principles like that. When Durvasa Muni came back, he understood that because of mystic powers. So then he was not happy that he felt like an insult, like Ambrish Maharaj by taking water before him, before his honoring anything. So then, with anger, he produces a big demon by pulling out some hair and chanting some mantras. So that great demon was meant to kill Ambrish Maharaj, but he couldn't do anything. Instead, he got destroyed. And then Sudarshana Chakra was protecting Ambrish Maharaj, and then Sudarshana Chakra goes after Durvasa Muni to kill him. But Durvasa Muni was going everywhere, including Supreme Lord, and seeking shelter from Sudarshan Chakra. So then finally, Lord says, you would go back, you would take shelter of my devotee only. Then Durvasa Muni comes and takes shelter of Ambrish Maharaj. Finally, Ambrish Maharaj is not, Ambrish Maharaj is happy. He prays to Sudarshan Chakra to please leave him like that. And then instead, he actually asked for forgiveness from Durvasa Muni. That is the greatness of Ambrish Maharaj, pure devotee. But when Durvasa Muni was trying to offend a pure devotee, Supreme Lord Sudarshan Chakra did not leave him. That is the point Prabhupada is emphasizing for us in this purport. That those on the path of liberation should be very careful not to offend a pure devotee. That's the other point we can learn from this verse. Going to text number 22. So, Supreme Lord is self-sufficient. He has everything he needs. But still he becomes dependent on his devotees. That is another restriction Arman is describing. So, in the verse is described, it does not care for Lakshmi Devi. It does not care for all the kings and demigods who are, oh no, no. That is, whereas many people in the world, including kings and demigods, they all want mercy of goddess of fortune, Lakshmi Devi, so they can get a lot of money and they can enjoy like that. But goddess Krishna himself doesn't care. Why? Because if he wants, just by thinking, hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis can be generated and they can serve him. So he's not going after Lakshmi Devi like that is described. So now, but same Supreme Lord who doesn't care about Lakshmi Devi is becoming dependent on devotees because whatever he wants he can get. But still, it becomes dependent on his devotees' love like that. So, so where is that person who is not grateful? So we should be grateful, understanding Supreme Lord Krishna's nature towards his devotees. Then we should worship him. That is the point being described here. So that Supreme Lord becomes dependent on devotees is his causeless mercy, not his weakness. That's the other point Prabhupada is dedicating his purport. Now, when devotee sees, oh my God, Supreme Lord is giving favor to me, Supreme Lord is becoming dependent on me, so I should be grateful to him, I should serve him like that, obligated, he should become like that. Prabhupada is indicating the purport. So that's where Maitreya Muni, uh, the Narada Muni instructions to uh, these Prachatas concluded, where he described how bhakti is the ultimate goal of all spiritual practices, and he described how Supreme Lord is the source of everything. So that means he should be the one who should be worshipped. The third and last portion of his instructions, last category of his instructions was how we should satisfy the Supreme Lord by performing bhakti unto him. Those are three categories of instructions Nadamani gave to Pechadas. These are very valuable instructions from a pure devotee, which are valuable for us also. To understand the value of bhakti, to understand the value of Supreme Lord's position, and to engage in bhakti towards him. Now going to text number 23. Now, this is chapter is concluding. So, remember, Srimad Bhagavatam is a conversation inside of conversation. First canto starts with conversation between Suta Goswami and sages of Naimisharanya. They are in Naimisharanya place. And they are discussing the conversation of Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. And Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, they are in near Hastinapur. And they are discussing the conversation between Maitreya Muni and Vidura. They were near the where Krishna was about to live, near that place, closer to Dwarka. So they were there at that place. So now Narad Muni and so Maitreya Muni and Vidura we had. And they are discussing what happened between the conversation between Narad Muni and Prachetas. So that means now that we heard Narad Muni's instructions to Prachetas, we'll go to the outer conversation like that. That's how the canto is ending. So now that we heard Narad Muni and Prachetas conversation, now he's describing what did Maitreya tell to Vidura like that. Next. What did Maitreya tell to Vidura? He said, Narad Muni described all these relationships with the Supreme Lord to the Prachetas. Afterwards, he returned to Brahmaloka, it seems. Narad Muni went back. So, Prabhupada is emphasizing that we need to hear about Krishna Katha from a pure devotee. And Prachetas got this opportunity to hear from Narad Muni about the activities of Supreme Lord and his devotees. Yeah, so now going to the next verse 24. So now, hearing from Narad Muni, Krishna's glories, which vanquish all ill fortune from the world. Prachesas, after hearing Krishna Katha, they became attached to Krishna. This is very, very important point for us also. Because, and then what did they happen? What happens to them? They meditated on Krishna's lotus feet and they advanced to ultimate destination. In the purport, Prabhupada emphasizes that by hearing the glories of the Lord from a realized devotee, the Prachetas easily attained strong attachment to Krishna. So, is similarly, for it is sure and certain, Prabhupada says, that anyone who always hears the glories of the Lord and thinks of his lotus feet will reach that supreme destination. So, there are two important things for us from this here. One is hearing Krishna Katha from pure devotees is very, very potent. So, because that will give us attachment to Krishna. In one sense, devotional service is about developing attachment to Krishna and developing detachment from material things and material objects, material relationships like that. So, that attachment to Krishna comes by hearing the glories of Krishna from pure devotee, by reading from Prabhupada's instructions, who is a pure devotee. That also we can develop attachment to Krishna. That's why it is important to hear Krishna Katha. So now another thing is, after hearing, we need to contemplate on the Krishna Katha that we heard. That's how we can engage our intelligence in Krishna's service. Of course, we can also engage in intelligence by thinking about how to increase our service, how to improve our service towards Krishna, like that also. So that's the other thing being described here. Prabhupada writes purport referring to 18th chapter, 65th verse. Manmanabhav madbhakto madhyajimam namaskuru mameveshyasi satyam te pratijane priyosime. So always think of me and become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus, you'll come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. How can we get to this position of always thinking of Krishna? By practicing our regulated devotion service, by chanting regularly, the heart becomes pure. And by hearing Krishna Katha, we'll develop attachment to Krishna. That's so When we develop attachment for somebody, we can remember always. Even in mundane relationships, we'll see. When we develop attachment for our wife, our husband, our children, we'll remember them always. Similarly, when we develop attachment for Krishna, we can remember him always. But how do we develop attachment for Krishna? By hearing from pure devotees about Krishna. That's the important essence of this whole uh, section also, in one sense. Pure devotee association and hearing Krishna Katha in that association. Now, Maitreya Muni is telling Vidura, I told you everything you wanted to know about the conversation between Narada Muni and Prachitas. So now we heard about Narada Muni and Prachitas conversation. We heard about Maitreya Muni and Vidura conversation who were discussing. Now we go to the outer loop of Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj conversation in text 26. Sukadeva Goswami is saying, Oh, King Parikshit, I have now finished telling you about the descendants of Uttanapada, who is the first son of Swayambhu Manu. So, remember, in the fourth canto started with description of who is Uttanapada. Uttanapada's son is Dhruva Maharaj, like that. And then Dhruva Maharaj's descendants, so many descendants are described, including Prithu Maharaj, King Vena, King Anga, all those personalities are described in that context. And then uh, now he says, I told you everything about Uttanapada's descendants now in this canto. Now the next canto, which is coming up, which is the next chapter, is saying that I'll describe the elder son of Swayambhu Manu. So who is Priyavrata? That's what he's saying. He's saying, please hear them attentively. Now text 27, he summarizes about Priyavrata pastime in in one verse itself actually. So then what does he say? Priyavrata received instructions from Narada Muni, but still he engaged in ruling the earth, even though he understood spiritual life. Then, after fully enjoying material positions, he divided his property among his sons, and then he attained his position by which he could return back home, back to Godhead. So, summarized whole Priyavata pastime, which is several chapters coming up in fifth canto in one verse. That is the nature of Sukadeva Goswami, Parishimara conversation, we'll see. So now he's saying that Priyavata got the instruction from Narada Muni. Main point, even though he's summarizing the whole activities in life, he's emphasizing the main aspect, which is receiving special instructions from Narada. And then he responsibly took care of his duties, second aspect. Then he achieved spiritual perfection. So nicely summarized. Association of pure devotee and getting instructions from him, performing our duties nicely while doing devotion service, and then finally achieve perfection with devotion service. That's how we summarize the life of a devotee. So we can learn from that what is important for us in our life also. Pure devotee association is the most important. Engaging in devotion service is the next important like that by following the instructions of pure devotee. Going to text 28. So now, um, what happened to Vidura is describing after hearing from Maitreya Muni like this. Who is talking this? Sukadeva Goswami is talking to Parikshit Maharaj. After hearing this Krishna's pastimes, even Krishna's devotees from Maitreya, Vidura became overwhelmed with ecstasy, it seems. And he had tears in his eyes. And he fell at the lotus feet of his guru, Maitreya Muni. He paid obeisances to Maitreya Muni. And then he fixed his Supreme Personality Godhead within the core of his heart, it seems. So Prabhupada writes importance of for self-realization. Um, it's important to surrender to bona fide guru and then take the dust of lotus feet of the guru on one's head, like that. Prabhupada is emphasizing the purport. So one cannot become a perfect devotee of the Lord without having the touch the lotus feet of great devotee. So which we saw in the example of Vidura now. Now Vidura uh, becoming ecstatic, becoming grateful. He's saying these words now in 29th verse. He says, by your causeless mercy, I've been shown the path of liberation by which I can go back to Godhead. So he's not saying, oh, I was such a good student. I heard so attentively from you. I understood everything so nicely because I'm so intelligent. He's not saying that. He's saying, because of your causeless mercy, you give me this knowledge. Because of this causeless mercy, you show me the path of devotion service like that. That's the mood of a devotee. He understands that pure devotee doesn't have any business to come to me and tell me. He doesn't need some money from me. He doesn't need want some glorification from me. That's not the reason he's coming. He's coming out of his causeless mercy. There's no real cause, material cause for him. He just want to give his mercy to others so that he can help them to go to Krishna, help them to become happy in devotion service like that. So that is what Vidura is recognizing about Maitreya Muni in this verse. So Prabhupada writes in the purport, as soon as we become free from material desires and associate with a pure devotee, path of returning back to Godhead, it becomes very clear. That means one is as take association of pure devotees, hear from them, and follow devotional practices. And then second is try to remove the material desires also. Try to not have material desires. Try to work on material desires also. Okay. Why? To engage in bhakti only, not for any other reason. Then that will help us to go back to Godhead. Prabhupada writes in the purport. Last two verses for the day, text 30. Vidura offered obeisances to Maitreya Muni. So Sukadeva Goswami is still speaking to Parshad Maharaj. And Vidura took his permission from Maitreya Muni and started back to Hastinapura to see his own kinsman. Although he had no material desire, this is important. Prabhupada elaborates in the purport. Why did Vidura go back to his relatives, Hastinapura, to see Dhritarashtra? Not because he wants to enjoy a relationship with the family, he wants to chit chat with them and have fun. Not that purpose. He was compassionate towards Dhritarashtra. He wants to deliver Dhritarashtra. That we saw in first canto already. That how when Vidura went back to Hastinapur, he gave strong instructions to Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra left home and he achieved perfection actually. So that's what is being described. Out of compassion is going, not to have fun like that. Text 31, the last verse for the whole canto. So he's giving the Falasruti. Who is giving the Falasruti? Sukadeva Goswami is giving the Falasruti to Parishad Maharaj. He's saying, anybody, those who hear these topics about kings who are completely surrendered to Krishna, obtain without difficulty so many things: long life, good wealth, good reputation, good fortune, and ultimately the opportunity to return back home, back to Godhead. So, is summarizing this fourth canto is all about several great personalities we heard. How Dhruv Maharaj retired the kingdom and went to the forest and he achieved the perfection. And then we heard about Prachinabari, Prith Maharaj, how he achieved perfection by going to the forest. And then we heard about Prachinabari, after he heard the instructions of Narada Muni, how he went to the forest and achieved perfection. And how Prachitas achieved the perfection we heard with the association of pure devotees like Lord Shiva, how they achieved perfection. And Narada Muni, also association also they got. So like that, when somebody hears all these kings who achieved perfection like this, by surrendering to Krishna, by engaging in bhakti, they will also feel the aspiration. I also need to do bhakti nicely. So I'll also achieve perfection like that. That's what, uh, that's so the fourth canto ends. So I'll mention one essential theme of this last section of chapters. We're concluding fourth canto. Maybe before that, I will briefly summarize a few different sections of how Swayam Bhagwan Keshav Maharaj summarizes fourth canto, four sections in a nice way. We discussed this in the past classes, but I'm summarizing it from his book, Swayam Bhagwan Keshav Maharaj books. So basically says, first section of pastime of Sati, Lord Shiva, and Daksha pastime, we learn the important lesson of how we might lose the spiritual wells of bhakti, practicing bhakti, by becoming bankrupt of the spiritual wealth if we offend a devotee. So we should be careful not to offend devotees like that. And for that, we learned the instructions in that time I described to all of you. How? we should be tolerant when somebody says something, somebody hurts us some way. We should be tolerant by not reacting immediately, but exercise patience, be calm for some time. Number one. Number two, we should understand the circumstance, context of the events. Why did they say like that? Maybe they have some other reason. They're not feeling well today. So they're not in a good mood today. Like that, we need to understand. They're not in a higher position currently to understand. Next is accepting that understanding that there may be differences between each other. So we should accept the differences. And then we should put the conflict in perspective. Is that important to go mad on him again just because they insulted me right now? What is the bigger picture? Like that. And then the real victory is not to win against others, but to progress in devotion service. That's the lesson from the first section. From Dhruv Maharaj section, he describes how determination is the best thing we can achieve. How do we achieve determination? By exercising patience, understanding that by performing bhakti, all good things will come, number one. And then number two, by enthusiasm in performing bhakti. Through that, we can be determined. That is a way of determination through mode of goodness. And through Prithu Maharaj's pastime, he describes Prithu Maharaj was a servant leader. So we can learn the lessons of being a nice servant leader. How? Some of the qualities he describes, I'll go through that. He describes how a servant leader is selfless, is not thinking about what me. And the servant leader is spiritual. So they're deeply connected to the Supreme Lord, deeply connected to the philosophy of Supreme Lord. They understand the bigger picture in life. And through that, they can guide others for material well-being and spiritual vibrancy also. So selfless, spiritual, and very strong. That means if sometimes they need to make some bold decisions, they'll make it. But with sensitivity at the same time also. Not just, it's the right thing to do, I'll do it. They are sensitive to others also. That's the other lesson we can learn from Prithumara's pastime. And finally, we learn in the last section of Prachinabari and Prachatas, we learn the lesson of how by pure devotee association is the root of devotion. That's how bhakti starts. That's how bhakti grows. Even as we grow in the highest point of devotion, we need the association of pure devotees. So they're the source of the causeless mercy. So that is the essence we learn from this section. So now we understand bhakti is coming from them. So now we should be careful. What happens in pure devotee association? Swami Bhagavan Keshava Maharaj describes this. That they they help us uh, clarify our genuine sincerity, quality, and devotion in our spirituality becomes clear in their association. Number one. Number two, they can detect problems in how we are practicing bhakti. So they'll guide us. Don't think like this. Don't hear from these people who are not in the sampradaya, because even though it appears very nice, practical and simple and nice, they're talking about Krishna only. But still, we should hear from only if a acharya comes from a proper sampradaya. When we're hearing from some new person, when we're reading a new book, we need to see, are they coming from sampradaya or not? That's an important question to ask and find out. And then they provide the clarity. They provide a big picture of our life, and they tell us this is a injurious behavior, like offending devotees is not important, not helpful for our bhakti like that. And then they also bless us with potency. They have the potency to help us change our ways by simple instruction. Why don't you do that like this? Why don't you read every day a little bit? Then that instruction will change our life patterns from bad habits to good habit like that. So that's the other thing we can learn from this section as given by Swayam Bhagavan Keshava Maharaj. So we'll pause here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kupasantubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. And that glorious canto, Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 5 starts tomorrow. Okay, we'll pause here. Let's offer obeisances for the right. Thank you so much, devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.